Okay, so Emmett Kelly is giving you the piece of cabbage, and he's very sad, and he recognizes the sadness. So now take us up from there. I mean, that's just beautiful.
Another important part of that, when I look back, it's just so many layers, is the sideshow.
Mm.
So there were tall people, fat people, snake people, tattoo people, young girl, probably 19 with no arms and legs. I mean, there were all of these people, and they were normal, you see. We ate together. Well, the other thing about the circus was very hierarchical, so the families had their, like even in traveling on the trains, the Wallendas say they had their own car. And then my mother and I would travel in the women's car. My father would travel in another car because we were more the peons there. Or in eating in the dining tent. All this was in tents. It was not indoors except Madison Square Garden. It was just surrounded by little midgets, tall giants.
Fellini.
And they were this was what people look like.
Right.
It wasn't like, it was only a sideshow to people who weren't part of the circus.
Now, I just stopped for a moment because you mentioned the flying Wallendas, and I don't think people would remember, you know, you and I of that generation. But can you just stop a little bit with the flying Wallendas because they were so famous? And
well, here's another piece then. I forget how many people were in the family, but the older gentleman,
Bruno, I think his name was, wasn't it?
I don't remember anymore,
I think
but he would stand underneath us. They were tightrope walkers, okay, and they didn't have a net. And he would stand underneath them so that if they would fall, he would catch them. And I identified with him, not with the tightrope walkers. And there was one act where the one man was riding a bike, and then there was somebody on his shoulders, and then off the bike there were women doing things down. Anyway, they did fall, and I was not there, but the old gentleman, I don't know if he was killed, or some of them did die, and some became, I was a child, so.
I kind of remember that. Yeah.
But he was the one I was always waiting to catch them, even though I was not.
Wow.
Not then. There was Uranus, I think was his name. He would stand on one finger, and I would just absorb these people, just absorb them. My father was very much against my participating in the circus, so I'd watch these kids my age doing trampoline things or whatever. I just kind of walked around, and I belonged to the circus, so I was safe. People knew who I was, so I could wander. In a way, it is like a Fellini. I just wandered through this world. My mother has a story somewhere. She actually recorded it for me not long before she died. When she learned to ride this Roman racing, she was standing her first time out, and there was another woman and a man, and they were racing, I don't remember how many times around the 3 rings, and the first thing they taught her was how to fall. So if you were falling, you sat on one horse. So in going around, she fell, but what was so amazing is she got back up in the race, and it brought down the tent. And as she was riding out of the tent, John Ringling North, who was the owner, congratulated her, and she said that was the highlight of her life. And the woman was angry, feeling she did it on purpose and took, people killed each other. I mean, this was not a
friendly group?
No, competition was high. Wow. Anyway, she was very angry that she had done it on purpose. Well, she never fell again, but the rumor went out because the man liked my mother, and the woman, like whatever, they were going to kill her. They were going to race her off the track, so they wanted her not to race. She said, I'll race and win, and I won't race again, and she did. I mean, this is a kind of world it's an amazing world there. It's like not like
wow,
a house and a car. Now I have the house and a car, right? I have 2 cars.
Okay, so when was it?
I was not born yet. This was before I was born.
With the racing, but how did you get into modern dance? I mean, what's that segue there? Was that the segue, or was there something that I don't know?
My mother was a dancer, so 6 months of the year she danced in Miami Beach on shows and clubs.
Is she a tap dancer, or?
She was any kind of dancer you would want.
Coochie cooch?
She actually danced. She traveled with Imogene Coco.
Oh, yeah.
I think at one point she was friends with Red Skeleton's first wife. Mm. She danced somehow. She got with name? Milton Berle, Ruth Wilder.
Ruth, I think I remember that.
No, you wouldn't.
I don't.
I don't think you would know that.
Really?
I did 2 videos of experiential anatomy and the teaching of young dancers, and I called it Ruth Wilder Productions.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
So I danced. She danced when she was pregnant, and I danced. I remember my first teacher was May Rose. I was 3, so I always danced.
And you went into modern?
Tap. It was tap, ballet, toe, acrobatic, and jazz.
Oh, you did?
I did all of that.
Great.
And sometimes she would go to class, and then we would come home and do it together. This was one of the ways we shared. And I'm not sure I would have survived my childhood without dance. That was really my...
I could say the same.
Yeah, my thing.
Mm-hmm.
And
why do you say that? Because this is important.
Well, one of the things that happened was when I went into 9th grade, there was a physical education teacher. This was a new school. I grew up in an area of Hialeah that was considered on the other side of the railroad tracks. And my mother was a bartender. My father she was called a barmaid in those days. He was a bartender. And then I had a stepfather who worked. He was a racetracker. And then, anyway, so it was...
kind of an underworld, really.
I grew up in the underworld. My father had mafia friends.
So where's the Jewish intellectual...
I married him. I'm not the Jewish intellectual.
Okay. So you were that my mother... what was that gangster,
Henny somebody.
Myron... I'll remember it.
Anyway, there were a lot of dark things in Miami, and I was friends with the daughter of some of the dark people. And there was one guy, I don't remember what his name is, he told my dad, "You don't like somebody, Joe, take care of him for you." He was a hitman or something. I mean, it's like there was this world of, who was the guy who wrote those books? Henry?
You don't mean O. Henry.
O. Henry.
O. Henry.
A lot of the characters in his books. Anyway, my mother, because she had to quit school, she was adamant that I would be well educated. And she worked really, really hard and never complained. And she saw that she was not a good teacher. I remember sitting on her lap when I was 4, and we would read this book, and she would say, "I just told you that word a minute ago." Not your calm.
And do you have siblings?
Yeah. Well, I have a half sister whom I met when I was 63.
Oh my God.
It was my father's daughter.
Oh.
That's another story.
Yeah, that is a story.
And that's
But anyway, so
story.
you were the only...
But I was fostered with a family with a daughter who was 6 years older for 6 years, part-time. That's another story. There are a lot of stories. And that's part of who I am, is that there are a lot of stories.
Mm-hmm.
And how to bring all of those stories, I know you have your own stories, how you bring all those stories into one person, and how that person is evolving always, and accepting all those pieces.
Right.
So anyway, in 9th grade, there was a physical education teacher called Miss Jordan, and she was not a dancer at all. She was a little bit, well, I won't say, but she somehow went to dance workshops and started a program at the high school in modern dance that we could take instead of physical education. So for 4 years, every day I had modern dance. And basically it was just, it's amazing. It was improvisational. I don't know how she did it, but she was quite extraordinary. And one woman asked me one day, one girl, she said, "Why is she so hard on you?" And I said, "Because she knows I can do it." And she just drove me in a certain way. And again, in the background, there was a band leader in the circus. I don't remember his name. This is, 50 years ago. And for 50 years, he never missed a performance.
Wow.
The show must go on. So there's this other thing which, when I became ill, I had to really let go of.
You know, I want to just pause here for a moment because I need to ask you this, because it seems to me I revere my dance training because it gave me the ability to endure, of being able to, in other words, you show up, it doesn't matter if you feel good, you don't feel good, it has nothing to do with moods, it has nothing to do with anything. I thank my dance training. I'm like, as I'm listening to you, I'm feeling the fortitude of what it's taken for you to bring your ideas out, to not be overwhelmed or conquered by the forces that would ordinarily defeat somebody, and you've been able to rise to the occasion. But I'm very aware that my dance training gave me an edge, that there's a certain sanctity to becoming a dancer, that you're entering this lineage, this amazing lineage. And I think of Isadora, and I think of the revolutionary dancers, of course, Nijinsky, and I think of the kind of flaming courage,
No, go.
I mean, that it took to do that. And that we inherit that when we go to class, it seems to me. And that, I'm listening to you and I'm feeling that. And so I don't want it to just go by, but just to say that fortitude and that courage and just determination, and particularly with the illness that you had as well. I mean, if I ask somebody to do something for 2 hours a day, if they, they look at me like I'm out of my mind. If somebody who's a dancer, they go, "Oh, is that it? Is that all? Oh, only 2 hours?" Because they know they've been initiated into this splendor. And as I'm listening to you, I'm also feeling the motivation that I have in creating this broader idea of kinesthetic brilliance. That as a dancer gets older, they can't do their, it's a short career. But what do you do with that brilliance and that capability to pierce the veil? Okay, so go on. It's enough out of me.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's what.
Well, I mean, that's why
about.
I feel that. I mean, I'm listening to you and I'm just feeling, well, that doesn't come from nowhere. I mean, yeah, you come from the Jews. That's what gives you, the ability to survive pogroms and stuff like that. But the dance training is such a reverence, it seems to me, that you become part of this cloth. So. I just think that's so important for those who come after us. Well, I don't know what year was this person with the modern dance, this woman, this PE teacher?